subir. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Madam President, for your very comprehensive remarks. I would now like to invite the esteemed Secretary General of the Rabita Mohammedia of Ulemas, Mr. Ahmed Abadi. It's not speaking. No. We will instead proceed towards the major portion of our conference. Let me just say, in concluding this opening session, that I want to thank our speakers for their statements. The conference's main aim is to provide a platform to discuss challenges and good practices in preventing and countering violent extremism through inclusive democratic participation. Together with the 2 associated youth training sessions that took place in July 2021, funded by Romanian Aid, this event will also initiate a reflection on the means of providing young people in particular with the necessary skills to help counter the scourges of violent extremism, both online and offline, and hopefully will be a means of immunizing youth against hate speech. I'm sure that today and tomorrow we will learn more about this ambitious approach, and this knowledge will serve as an inspiration for the participants of our conference. In concluding, I want to use this opportunity to once again express my deep gratitude to Foreign Minister of the Kingdom of Morocco, His Excellency Mr. Nasser Bourita, for hosting this conference. Thank you, sir, for your remarkable contribution in organizing the event and for your hospitality. I also want to express again my sincere appreciation to the current presidency of the Community of Democracies, Romania, which was represented today by His Excellency Foreign Minister Orescu. Romania has had a long and sustained commitment to the Community of Democracies, and without its ongoing support and assistance, the organization of this conference would not have been possible. And finally, let me commend efforts made by the staffs of both countries' Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the staff at the Permanent Secretariat of the Community of Democracies for their work in making this event happen. Excellencies, Governing Council members, civil society representatives, distinguished guests and friends, let me just say with certainty that the following 2 days of this global conference is going to be fruitful. And I think it will substantially expand our knowledge regarding the prevention of violent extremism. So thank you. And now I'd like to introduce the moderator of the following set of presentations, Mr. Iulian Fota, who is Director General of the Romanian Diplomatic Institute and an Associate Professor at the National Intelligence Academy. Mr. Fota will moderate the remaining sessions. Mr. Fota, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Secretary General Garrett, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies. I am proud and honored to be the moderator of the next session, a session which has 3 parts. For the first part, we have a keynote speaker, and I will introduce immediately Ms. Claire Hutchinson. For the second part, 2 of our younger colleagues will present the results of the training session, a training session which took part in Rabat in mid-July. And for the last part of this session, I will chair a panel of distinguished experts, addressing a very important topic, the topic of radicalization risk of social media. But first of all, please allow me to introduce our keynote speaker for this afternoon, Ms. Claire Hutchison. Ms. Claire Hutchison, just a second. So Ms. Claire Hutchison took office as the NATO Secretary General Special Representative for Women, Peace and Security in January 2018 and ended her mandate in 2021. She used to be the high-level focal point on all aspects of NATO's contribution to women, peace and security agenda. Ms. Hutchinson worked as Senior Gender Advisor with the United Nations for over a decade. She has been instrumental in setting the strategic development of women, peace, and security for the United Nations Department of Peacekeeping in New York, Kosovo, and Lebanon. Ms. Hutchinson has long been a championship for women's issues, working with women's groups for many years and supporting projects for women's empowerment. Ms. Hutchinson, I'm quite grateful, for your effort, for your participation at this conference, and from this moment, you have the floor. You have the floor, please. please.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Julian. And I would like to thank the Community of Democracies in the Kingdom of Morocco, and also to say to Morocco, well done on your National Action Plan development and your work on preventing violent extremism. So hello, good afternoon, bonjour, assalamu alaikum. Thank you to the Secretary General, Excellencies, gentlewomen, gentlemen, and colleagues. As you heard, violent extremism is not a new phenomenon, and it does not belong to one background, culture, or religion. It is a persistent global threat that remains an impediment to international peace and security. Extremism is also not just a man's issue. Extremist violence has claimed thousands of lives around the world and forced mass displacement. From India to Norway, London to Tunis, extremist violence has shattered lives and upended global stability. Extremist violence allows for actions to be taken against perceived or real grievances. Exclusion, humiliation, and prejudice leads to those grievances, and it eradicates a sense of belonging. With more than half the world's population under the age of 30, in many parts of the world, there's a growing youth detachment, and an increasing number of young people, especially young men, are feeling alienated and looking for alternative sense of meaning and belonging. In the European context alone, the fastest growing age group amongst radicalized individuals is 12 to 17 years old. The United Nations recognize both the vulnerability and the immense value of youth through the adoption of Resolution 2250 on youth, peace and security, and also in its action to prevent violent extremism. This emphasized the need to recognize factors that push youth towards violent extremism, and it urges all member states to identify the right instruments for supporting empowering young people. And while youth are generally overrepresented as perpetrators of various attacks or violent insurrection or remonstrating against social, economic, or political exclusion, their voices are largely invisible in the accepted political processes due to lack of adequate mechanisms for participation and lack of opportunity. Additionally, Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security highlighted the critical importance of women, who are half the world's population and should be, absolutely should be, central to all discussions on peace and security. The resolution was also followed up by 9 other resolutions, one of which, Resolution 2242, calls for women's contribution to decision-making in the comprehensive approaches exploring gender around terrorism and violent extremists. We know that a country's stability factor is linked to equality, and we can predict the level of insecurity of a state by the treatment of women. When women are empowered socially and economically, when women and youth have access and opportunities, and when youth are educated, girls and boys equally, there is less violence, and therefore less opportunities for extremism to take root and spread. And yet, still, women and youth representatives are absent from decision-making processes. Policymakers overlook the ways in which women and young people can contribute to or prevent extremism. And this puts all our nations at a disadvantage. While the majority of violent acts around the world are committed by men and young men, it is crucial we recognize women, but not only as victims, because women can be perpetrators of terrorists and extremists, sympathizers and enablers, and mobilizers and recruiters. However, we as the global community often struggle to understand women and their role as active agents. And it is viewed as exceptional when a woman condones or actively participates in any kind of act. And we see lessons from Sri Lanka, Kashmir, Nigeria, and most recently with Daesh, where women have played an important and pivotal role in terrorist activities. Women participating in political violence is not new. The constructed idea that women are not capable or innately not going to take part in violent acts because of her gender falls short and is a very dangerous assumption. Our assumptions that presume that extremism actions are the adult man's preserve is wrong. And these assumptions are dangerous and a fault line in adequate response. If we fail to recognize the diverse roles of women and young people, then we fail to integrate a gender perspective throughout our work to counter violent extremism. We are missing a key aspect in this global fight. But while accepting that women can and do engage in violent extremism, we also must recognize their strength and their strength as the heart of community and family. Women play many roles, and as teachers, organizers, and leaders, they are well placed to counter and prevent violent ideology. Women are instrumental in guiding children, proactively engaging with vulnerable youth, and they can also author powerful counter narratives. Women can spot and address the early signs of radicalization, directly intervene with girls and women at risk to being radicalized. And more importantly, they can shed light on existing power dynamics to give us an understanding of how violent extremism impacts women and men differently. Terrorism and violent extremism affects everyone, and the fight to combat this requires everyone to be involved. This is the whole of society approach, as you heard, and it should be underpinned by an intersectional gender analysis. Women and youth empowerment and participation is crucial. Understanding the complex and important roles women and youth play can shape effective responses and create more stable and secure societies. Understanding the broad spectrum of motivation, in particular for youth, is also critical, and research on drivers of exclusion is essential to better understand this. We must do better at offering women and young people a viable alternative to extremism, and we can begin by emphasizing democratic and human rights-based values. We can empower women to play a more active role against extremism and provide alternative narratives and opportunities for young people. But more than that, we must address the ideology that encourages violent extremism by working with the at-risk populations through outreach, gender equality initiatives, and empowerment. When we talk of comprehensive responses to fight extremism, we must not neglect the role of women and young people, but sadly, we often do. So practically, what steps can we take? It's not enough to counter violent extremism, we must prevent it. And this calls for early intervention into interpretations of culture, hatred, and ignorance. Women play key roles in their communities. They are key to prevention, and they can identify the early signs that lead to extremism. We should provide more opportunities for women to enhance their role in early warning and encourage and reward the actions of prevention. As community leaders, women embed gender equality principles, uphold women's rights and counter narratives. We as the international community should do more to support both general education and religious learning for women and enhance the ability to dialogue rights and women's rights within the framework of religious convention. A gender perspective also must be included in all our efforts to counter violent extremism, from policy making to security sector and capabilities enhancement, training and education, and including more women in security sector, including in military and police. But we also need to educate men about women's rights. Identifying risks to women and young people online and providing support to online counter-narrative and combating hate speech, so we can disarm the process of extremism through dialogue by educating and empowering young women and men and starting as soon as possible in schools and youth centres. We must guarantee that women have community support, especially minority and refugee women and youth who are alienated from traditional networks because they are most at risk. And finally, identifying what does social cohesion look like? How do we make sure that all elements of society have the ability to express themselves, to achieve goals, and ultimately to be secure? It is clear that women can be powerful allies in this journey, and only understanding the complex, important roles women can play, we can shape effective response and create a stable society. We must view women not just as women at risk, but also women who pose risk, and we must integrate a gender perspective into our work. Women and youth can prevent or action violence. They can support or prevent extremism. It is incumbent upon us, policymakers and operational actors, to recognise this. Women and youth contributions in fieldwork and policy development can just better inform our strategies and enhance long-term sustainability. We know violent extremism is a threat that knows no borders, but we also know this challenge is reduced when we work together globally and with all of society, women and men, the young and the aged. We must listen to the voices lost in the ever-widening gap between culture and power, between the heard and the silenced. And we must listen to those lost voices of disempowerment, to women and to young people. And we must urgently and fully address gender extremist violence as gendered. This demands gendered responses, and this starts with integrating a gender perspective into all our work and addressing the invisibility of women in political inquiry and analysis. I thank you all very much for your time. I wish you a very successful conference and look forward to hearing the results. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hutchinson. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your very comprehensive message. You addressed many important aspects of today's topic. And I see no better way of underlining again your message than to invite two of our young colleagues to present the results of the training session, which I already told you took part in Rabat in mid-July, between 15th and 16th of July 2021. So it is my great pleasure to invite Youssef El Mezawi and Salma El Matiki to present the results of the training session. The training session with youth, which had as a topic, preventing and countering violent extremism. Youssef, Salma, you have the floor.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the Almighty and the Merciful, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I am grateful to have this privilege to speak here today about matters of great importance for our country and the world. My name is Youssef El Mezawi. I'm the Vice President of Idmaj Foundation for the Development and a Young Peace Builder. I've been asked to speak about my experience from the training sessions on preventing and countering violent extremism, which took place in Rabat last July. During this workshop, I gained a deep understanding of the different causes leading to violent extremism and the skills and the techniques on how to prevent it from affecting our communities. Thanks to this training, I feel more knowledgeable and more aware and prepared to work with members and groups in my community or any communities to help prevent violent extremism. I feel confident and able to identify recruitment methods and respond to violent extremism threats and prevent radicalization within the community. Furthermore, we were provided with tips and guidance on how to include preventing violent extremism in our programming as civil society activists. And this is very crucial. The training methodology was interactive and participatory. It enabled the trainers to use various ways to elicit our ideas and incited all the participants to share their knowledge and create an atmosphere of a dynamic way of learning. A method that I use right now when I hold a workshop for youth on this topic or any relevant ones. Through these workshops, we discovered different approaches on how to prevent violent extremism. And I was able to grasp and understand the complexity of violent organization recruitment strategies and how to identify general profiles of individuals ready to be recruited and understand the psychological or social conditions which make some individuals vulnerable and join these groups. These strategies also include how violent extremist organizations use the internet and social media as a tool in channeling their ideas and influencing vulnerable individuals and recruiting them. Through many experiences I had in this area, I strongly believe that after-school programs are a great tool to educate youth and women on such important topics. And that is what we try to do at the IDMAJ Foundation for Development, which was created in 2006 by Mr. Bubkar Mazouz, a community organizer and a fervent for social activist and a visionary. IDMAJ's ultimate goal is to foster peace, understanding, and mutual respect and tolerance through citizenship and education designed for children and youth from disadvantaged neighborhoods. And our mission is to encourage at-risk children and vulnerable youth to stay in school, avoid delinquency, drug addiction, and extremism through various activities such as theater, music, dance, choir, or sports, or any activities that they are interested to become good citizens and future leaders who could contribute to the development of their country. And in IDMAJ, we through our culture and community centers, we reinforce the values of generosity and tolerance, empathy, and love. And this is very important for the kids, children, and the youth. The experience of IDMAJ and the workshops we attended, we learned that police and security services are no longer enough to win the fight against violent extremism. States must instead improve community cohesion, social mobility, and education. And policies that go towards more to social inclusion or social mobility and more education are more likely to drive down violence. This is why we need to include peace education in school programs and extracurricular activities and work on projects to teach children and youth on how to live in a socially inclusive society. In this disaster era marked by extremism and violence, we very much regret and strongly reject the use of religion as a cover for genocide and outrageous crimes. And another factor that should be taught to youth is that every human being should be able to practice his or her religion freely and openly, that we all should respect each other's religion and tolerate different beliefs. And unfortunately, many people around the world still think terrorists of Muslim conviction are following Islamic rules, while Islam calls for peace, tolerance, and respect of other religions. This is another dark tunnel that we should shed some light on by teaching our youth the fundamentals of each religion and how to accept others and respect their religion. Before I conclude my talking, I would like to add one element, which is the role of youth to eradicate violent extremism. I believe that decision makers should sincerely and clearly involve the youth, listen to them, and give them a chance to prove themselves and involve them in the decision-making process. Young people are involved in preventing violence, countering violent extremism, and transforming conflict and building peace around the world and in their communities. But however, their work often lack recognition and support. So young people, they are the future leaders and change makers. So by cultivating their leadership and giving them opportunities to share their voice with the community, you will be investing in a future that is better, brighter, and led by the youth of today. And to conclude, I would like to express my gratitude and appreciation to the Permanent Secretary of the Community of Democracies, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Morocco, the Rabita Muhammadiyya for Ulama, and the National Human Rights Council of Morocco for organizing this rich and informative training sessions for young people that is really beneficial for us. And my profound thanks also to the facilitators, Mr. Adnan Rais and Ali Al-Aksab, and the whole team for organizing this workshop. Thank you once again for this opportunity to share with you today my experience, thoughts, and ideas for a peaceful world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Youssef. An excellent presentation. Salma, I want very kindly to invite you also to share your thoughts with us and to complement the presentation of your colleagues. So Salma, you have the floor, please.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Salma Matishi. I'm 24 years old. I'm from Casablanca, and I represent Emergence Foundation for Development. On the mid of July, I had the chance to participate in a training to prevent and counter violent extremism in Rabat by Mr. Adnan Rais and other facilitators. The training provided an innovative and dynamic learning journey that helped us gaining insights into the root causes of violent extremism. The training focused on the early identifications of traits and, more importantly, analyzes the effectiveness of measures available to respond to these traits. We were equipped with appropriate capabilities, skills, knowledge, a better understanding and awareness through some interventions, very good interventions by some experts that include a focus on the harder skills and tools and techniques to improve our knowledge about the factors of violent extremism. We were also introduced to new terms and keywords, and we had the chance to correct our knowledge about some keywords like extremism, violent extremism, radicalization. We had the chance to learn and to study some real life cases that help us see the factors that lead to violent extremism by working on some real life cases. Those case studies helped us understanding that violent extremism process does not follow a single process or a single pathway, and there are no process or no specific stages or steps involved. We also had the chance to learn that radicalization is often a social process involving interaction with others. However, there are reported cases of individuals self-radicalizing. The rate at which a person becomes radicalized can vary greatly. People may become radicalized rapidly, while for others it is a more gradual process. Some may start to become radicalized only to stop at a certain point or continue to become radicalized later. The training had different activities that made the learning easier and that made us, see and understand more the real problem. We could work in groups and share our thoughts, and especially all the 20 participants that were in the training were from organizations and associations that work in the field, and we had the chance to share our experiences, our methodologies, and to help each other to improve our ways to help our communities. At the end of the training, we could work on our own projects and we could bring our own ideas about ways that we can prevent and counter violent extremism. And the team I was part of, we worked on a virtual campaign by making videos of people that are cured from violent extremism and who our life became better and who we believed at that point that they were examples for others. So our campaign was about sharing those videos about those successful people that one day were violent extremists. As Yusuf mentioned, we work in the field with our foundation, which is Emergence Foundation for Development, which was before Emergence Neighborhoods Association. We work in marginalized areas like Sidi Moumen and Ain Sba. We have cultural centers there where we work with kids and youth on these sensitive topics, because we believe that the change should come from the roots. The change should come from the families, because like when you during our case studies, most of them the violent extremists, they had problems in their family, maybe not always because of poverty or something like that. It was just some people who couldn't find people who can listen to them, who can follow what they want and stuff. So we work on that with families and with kids, and help them see the real causes of this problem by many trainings and many activities that can help them, avoid this kind of stuff. Yeah, I believe that my friend Yusuf said everything about the training and the foundation. So I just want to finish my intervention by thanking everyone who helped organizing this training. It was very, very helpful and truthful and fruitful, and helped us, as I said earlier, improve our skills and improve our ways to help our communities, especially, as I said before, we work in marginalized areas. And I want to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Rabita of Mohammedia for giving us the chance to participate in such a training. And I would like to see more similar trainings, because this is how the change can happen, and this is how we can target more people. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you very much, Salma. Great presentation, and listening you presenting, your conclusions. It was very clear for me that you enjoyed a lot the training session, and it's quite clear that the Moroccan Ministry of Foreign Affairs done a great job organizing, the session and giving you the chance to discuss a topic which is very important for your future. So, Salma, Youssef, thank you very much again for your presentations. After the very comprehensive and very generous message of Ms. Hutchinson, and after these excellent presentations of our younger colleagues, we move to the second part of our session, a panel of 4 distinguished personalities, a panel of 4 experts, a panel addressing a topic which is quite challenging and important, the radicalization risks of social media. Our panelists, based on their professional experience, will draw attention to the digital revolution that has brought both advantages and threats to our modern world, such as the weaponization of social media by malign forces seeking to radicalize our youth. They will explain you how and why extremist organizations have developed particularly convincing tactics that appeal to frustrated youth, fueling grievances, promoting extremist ideologies, and inciting violent actions. The same extremist organizations very often use half-truths, misinformation, and conspiracy theories to interpret history and geopolitics, often seeking to dehumanize the enemy. So, after the presentation of the topic, and after my very short explanations on how this panel, has been prepared, let me introduce our first panelist and our first speaker, Ms. Samad Ghazi, who is the director of the Masarat Center for Studies and Research in Communication and Forecasting, and he's also a member of the Rabita Mohammedia de Ulema. Mr. Ghazi, you have the floor, please. Please, Mr. Ghazi, unmute your microphone, please. Thank you.
شكرا على الدعوة الكريمة لهذا المنتدى الدولي الذي يتطارح قضية في غاية الأهمية والخطورة التي تتعلق باستغلال المتطرفين لوسائل التواصل الاجتماعي. كلنا يعلم أننا اليوم نعيش واقعاً رقمياً جديدا، وأستسمحكم لا أريد أن أستعمل المصطلح الواقع الافتراضي، فلم نعد في واقع افتراضي لأننا أصبحنا بإزاء واقع موازي للواقع المادي الذي نعيش فيه، وهو الواقع الرقمي، حيث تقع فيه 4 عمليات في غاية الأهمية يمكن أن نرصدها في مفهوم التجنيد. الوسائل الرقمية الجديدة أو ويب 2.0، يعني الانتقال من مرحلة الإنترنت إلى مرحلة مواقع التواصل الاجتماعي، أصبحنا أمام واقع رقمي جديد يقع فيه التفاعل، بحيث أن المصفوفة السابقة التقليدية التي مضت كنا نتحدث عن التواصل السمعي ثم التواصل البصري مع الإذاعة مع الشبكة مع الوسائل التي نعرفها جميعا. الإنترنت جمع كل هذه الوسائل المتصلة بالتواصل والتفاعل، مما جعل منه قوة في غاية الأهمية. المتطرفون انتبهوا إلى هذه النقلة الرقمية التي عرفها العالم والتي عرفتها البشرية. هذا كسب تكنولوجي جديد، عوض أن يستغل في تعزيز الثقافة الديمقراطية وفي تعزيز ثقافة التسامح وفي تعزيز ثقافة الانفتاح واندماج العالم، استغل لبناء الحدود ونشر الكراهية ونشر مختلف أنواع التعصبات التي يعتبر التطرف العنيف وثقافة الخفي أكبر تجلياتها. إذن هذه الوسائل جعلت من المتطرفين يصلوا إلى أبعد نقطة ممكنة يوجد فيها الإنترنت. فالإرهاب ليس جديدا والعنف ليس جديدا، بل إن الوسائل المتطورة للرقميات جعلتهم يصلون إلى أبعد نقطة في العالم بأفكارهم السامة، فهم يجندون ويقومون بالدعاية، وكذلك ساعدتهم هذه الوسائل كذلك على التنظيم، بحيث لم يعد لهم حيز مادي معين من خلال مقرات معينة يمكن أن تراقب وتؤثر أمنيا، بل أصبح لهم تنظيم رقمي ذري بشكل خلايا متفرقة تستغل الألغوريثمات في وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي. والأمر الذي زاد الطينة دلة كما يقال هو أنه أصبح تيسير تنفيذ العمليات كذلك الإرهابية أصبح متيسرا من خلال هذه وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي والإنترنت، بحيث يقوم أو ييسر الإنترنت أو وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي وغير ذلك من التطبيقات الرقمية من واتساب وتليجرام وغير ذلك من الوسائل إلى غير ذلك من الأمور، كلها أصبحت تخدم هذه ال4 أمور التي سمينا بالتجنيد والدعاية والتنظيم والتعقيد. فنحن أمام واقع رقمي جديد تشكلت فيه أجيال جديدة، ولذلك الالتفات إلى الطفولة وإلى الشباب باعتبارهم زي جينيريشن والفا جينيريشن، وهذه الأجيال كلها ولدت في زمن الإنترنت وتشكلت نفسياتها وعقولها وتمثلاتها وإدراكاتها كلها تشكلت بهذا الكتب الرقمي الجديد الذي تشكل فيه الصورة وتشكل فيه الأصوات المرافقة للصورة تأثيرا كبيرا يجلب العقول الوجدانية، حيث أن شبابنا اليوم نجد دعاية داعش مثلا تقوم على استثمار المخيال الذي يستأنس به الشباب والأطفال في ألعاب الفيديو من حيث الصورة والحركة والموسيقى المرافقة، بحيث أن الشاب أو الطفل الذي يعاني من هشاشة معينة يجد أن يدخل يعني يتماهى نفسيا كأنه في مشاهد أكسيون والحركة. ولذلك نجد استقطاب المتطرفين لا يتم من خلال سردية دينية فقط، سردية تعتمد النصوص الدينية للإقناع، بل يعتمد استثمار المخزون الحركي إذا صح التعبير الإخراج السينمائي المغامر الذي يبحث عن المتعة في القتل والعنف، لأن ألعاب الفيديو كما تعلمون تعج بالأحداث العنيفة، بحيث ينبغي إعادة النظر في الألعاب هندسة ألعاب الفيديو، يجب أن تكون أكثر حاملة بخطابات تكون إيجابية وتكون أقل، إن لم نقل أن تتفادى كل مظاهر العنف التي يتشبع بها ويتشربها الأطفال منذ صغرهم، لأنه لا يمكن أن ينجح في لعبة إلا بعد أن يقتل مئات ومئات الأشخاص أو غير ذلك من الأشخاص. فألعاب الفيديو وكذلك الألغوريثمات، نجد أن منصات يوتيوب وغيرها سمحت ببث مشاهد القتل والعنف، يجب أن تحظر مثل هذه الفيديوهات. هناك مبادرة منذ 2017 المنتدى الدولي لجوجل ويوتيوب وغيرها من المنصات الرقمية، هناك جهود تبذل من أجل الحد من خطاب الكراهية وتطرف العنف، ولكن ينبغي أن تتضافر الجهود أكثر من أجل العكوف على بناء سردية بديلة، النوفال ناراتيف، سردية جديدة تعطي مضامين تحتفي بقيم الديمقراطية، بقيم التسامح، بقيم الانفتاح بشكل جمالي، يعتمد بقصص مصورة، يعتمد ألعاب الفيديو إلى غير ذلك من الأمور. الإرهابيون يعني كان يتطلب عمل إرهابي، يتطلب تكلفة كبيرة، يتطلب لوجيستيك كبير. مع الكسب الرقمي فإنهم لا يحتاجون إلى الانتقال، إلى الفيزا، إلى غيرها من الإجراءات التي تساعد في الحساب. ولذلك ينبغي أن تبنى مناعة، لا يمكن أن نتحدث عن مجرد وقاية، ينبغي أن نبني إيميليزاسيون، مناعة للشباب، بحيث نضمن له الحرية ونضمن له الحقوق لكي يرى ويسمع ويقرأ ويطلع على المعلومات، ولكن من خلال تقوية جهازه وتفكيره النقدي من أجل الموازنة والاختيار والتمييز بين الخطابات المتطرفة والخطابات الكراهية والخطابات الإيجابية. وشكرا جزيلا لكم.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ghazi. Thank you very much. The second panelist is Mr. Rafi Lawal from Nigeria. Let me say also a few words to introduce him. Mr. Rafi Lawal is the founder and executive director of Building Blocks for Peace Foundation, an organization building the resilience of people against violent philosophies and promoting sustainable peace in Nigeria. Through his leadership, over 20,000 youth have been empowered on conflict prevention and peace building through capacity building training, workshops, and community sensitization. So it is my great pleasure now to invite Mr. Rafi Lawal from Nigeria to take the floor.
Okay, greetings to everyone. My sincere apologies for my video. My internet is not very strong, so I would like to crave your indulgence to allow me speak without it for now. It's my pleasure to join everyone at this meeting to look at the radicalization risk of social media. and with particular focus on how it affects young people. And I want to start by saying that since the events of 9/11, there have been some kind of turning point in the understanding of terrorism and radicalization globally. And of course, the internet has played a very critical role, especially in how terrorist organizations have operated. And this has, to a very large extent, given stakeholders all around the world a big concern. I think that it's no doubt that young people are majority of those who are victims of the radicalization interventions of extremist groups around the world, given the fact that majority of those who use social media platforms and particularly internet are also young people. And I think that whatever preventive mechanisms that we're designing should also capture this category of people. But I have some very fundamental things to also point out. The first is that social media itself does not radicalize, people. You have people who are also at the background trying to use social media as a tool to, carry out their selfish agenda. Then again, the question around the ownership of some of these social media platforms, for example, Facebook, Twitter, and all of that, it's also something that we need to also begin to look at, given the fact that many of these social media platforms are not even registered within national boundaries, but of course their effect transcends across board. So it's something that I think that we need to also look at. Like I said at the beginning, that social media itself does not radicalize young people. There are some structural issues. There are some push and push factors that makes young people vulnerable to some of these extremist groups and makes them vulnerable for radicalization. And I think that we need to also begin to see how to address some of these things. Majority of them have been highlighted, I guess. The question around the feeling of injustice, especially among young people, the question around extremist religious beliefs, identity crisis, poverty, unemployment, and so on. So for me, I think that if we are to address the threats and the danger that social media poses, especially to young people, we need to also begin to see how we can use social media as a critical tool for de-radicalization and counterterrorism. And I think that we need to see how to ensure that we use social media to propagate clear understanding of what religious practices entails, so that people who are vulnerable to some of these extremist doctrines are aware of what the various religions talked about, and so they do not fall into all these wrong doctrines. And I think that we need to create an avenue, especially for young people who want to seek redress. Conflict management mechanism is something that is very key. I strongly believe that it's when people do not have that sense of getting justice in the established institutions of the state that we have, that they then tend to fall victims of extremist ideological groups. So I think that we need to also prioritize youth inclusion and integration is very key, especially in addressing the structural challenges that we all face across board. Then, of course, we must also create some kind of avenue to address the mental health issues, especially the ones that young people are facing across the world. For me, there are already interesting policy frameworks that guarantees digital rights, especially of people across the world. And we need to also see that some of these policy frameworks, for example, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Warsaw Declaration, for example, the African Declaration on Internet Rights and Freedom. All these rights should be operationalized among member states. For me, I think that any government that limits online freedom is one that is trying to impede the creativity of our people and limit the maximization of the full benefits that the internet and social media, poses for us all. There is no doubt that the social media and the internet has exposed, especially young people, to several benefits that we cannot begin to highlight today. Networking among young people all over the world, education among young people all over the world, the manifestation of their aspirations all over the world. So we must see to ensure that this privilege is not taken away. It's not taken away from them. So for me, I think that any attempts to disconnect people from the internet violates their rights and against this is against international law. What we need to do as concerned stakeholders is to see how to guarantee the digital security, the digital space, especially for young people across the world. So for me, digital rights are human rights, and the right to online privacy and freedom of expression should be guaranteed, especially for young people. In Nigeria, for example, we saw the ban on Twitter platform on the excuse that the platform has been used to spread hate speech, especially across the country, which to a very large extent is very valid. But cutting off the head is not the solution to a bad baby. Permit me for that illustration. So the point I'm trying to make again is that as stakeholders, we need to come up with a mechanism that ensure that those who want to spread hate speech, those who want to spread terrorist ideologies, do not find a soft landing to do so. And government across board must come and rise up to the responsibility of guaranteeing the digital space for all citizens across the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawal. Thank you very much for your presentation. Although your presentation had no video, your message was loud and clear, and I'm grateful for that. On chat, I have a request. I guess it's from the organizers. So I count very much on the friendship of Miss Alina Borgawano, and I will ask her permission to invite Mr. Munir Ben Salah to take the floor and to speak now in our panel. So, Mr. Ben Salah, if you hear me, please, you have the floor.
Merci. Merci pour votre invitation. Je réitère notre appui en tant que partenaire, bien sûr, à l'organisation de ce projet et cette conférence mondiale sur la participation démocratique inclusive pour prévenir et contrer l'extrémisme violent. Je souhaite rappeler que le Royaume du Maroc a organisé des élections locales, régionales et législatives en septembre dernier, en plus des élections professionnelles de représentants des salariés, des membres de la Chambre des conseillers. Le Conseil national des droits de l'homme est habilité par la loi à observer les élections et préside la commission spéciale d'observation des élections. Le CNDH et la Commission ont accrédité 19 organisations internationales, 44 ONG nationales et une institution nationale avec plus de 5000 observateurs, dont 568 pour le Maroc. Le Conseil avait conclu dans son rapport préliminaire du 9 septembre que les élections se sont déroulées conformément aux règles établies et que les observations notées par les observateurs ne touchent pas globalement aux indicateurs de transparence. Le Conseil, qui a déployé pour la première fois un dispositif d'observation à travers les réseaux sociaux, avait relevé certains points inquiétants quand même. La publication de plusieurs supports électoraux contenant des formes de violence à l'égard des femmes, exemple, des photos de femmes candidates de taille plus petite ou inexistantes par rapport à celles des hommes candidats, harcèlement et insultes, pratique de la désinformation par la publication de vidéos de violence en dehors du Maroc en les liant au contexte électoral, publication de posts appelant à la non-participation sur Twitter dans 79% en dehors du Maroc, violence verbale et menaces proférées envers un journaliste à l'Ayoun pour son choix personnel exprimé en faveur d'un parti politique. Outre ces inquiétudes exprimées lors de l'observation de sélection, le CNDH a également étudié dans ses rapports annuels thématiques plusieurs cas problématiques eu égard des droits humains en ligne et hors ligne. Le Conseil des droits de l'homme de l'ONU, dans sa résolution 38L10, juillet 2018, s'est déclaré préoccupé par le fait que dans une société mondialisée, les terroristes et leurs partisans utilisent de plus en plus les technologies de l'information et de la communication. On constate à cet égard que la prévention et la répression du terrorisme sont des activités d'intérêt public qui revêtent une grande importance, tout en réaffirmant que les États doivent veiller à ce que toute mesure soit prise pour combattre le terrorisme soit conforme aux obligations que leur impose le droit international, en particulier le droit international des droits de l'homme, le droit international des réfugiés, le droit international humanitaire. Mesdames et messieurs, le CNDH, dans des études relatives au sujet, a relevé plusieurs formes utilisées par des individus et des groupes confirmés par des institutions internationales, des rapporteurs spéciaux de l'ONU, le Parlement européen, des universités, dans la propagande extrémiste. Exemple, la répétition constante de slogans ou d'idées pour les rendre courants et acceptés, l'exploitation et la citation de symboles ou de personnalités en dehors du contexte et ou en leur attribuant de fausses citations, la présentation de faits ou de points de vue d'une manière frauduleuse ou trompeuse afin de susciter la déception, appel à la peur, à la colère, aux préjugés et aux stéréotypes pour assurer la mobilisation. À titre d'illustration, analysant les réseaux sociaux les plus utilisés, on peut identifier des éléments suivants relatifs à des campagnes de propagande extrémiste et de radicalisation. Sur Facebook, plateforme la plus populaire, avec une richesse immense des données des utilisateurs permettant le micro-ciblage ultra précis, ces algorithmes donnent la priorité au contenu en fonction de la popularité et non la véracité, où les groupes créent un sentiment de communauté tout en gardant le contenu manipulé hors de vue, le rendant difficile à retracer. Twitter, des bots et des comptes semi-automatiques faciles à configurer permettent la diffusion rapide de la désinformation. La plateforme autorise l'anonymat et la création de plusieurs comptes, en plus de la vulnérabilité des algorithmes de classement concernant les tendances et les hashtags. Instagram, plateforme avec un public jeune, ne s'attendant pas à être confronté à un contenu politique, donc vulnérable, application visuellement orientée favorisant les mêmes, avec des fonctions explorées permettant la diffusion de contenus problématiques. YouTube, les algorithmes de classement de contenu les classent en fonction de la popularité et non la qualité de l'information, poussant les utilisateurs aux extrêmes, outre les fonctions autoplay par défaut qui permet la lecture automatique que l'algorithme juge relatif au sujet recherché. Les applications de messagerie instantanée, la désinformation provient de ceux qui sont perçus comme source sûre, famille, amis, messages diffusés en groupe fermé et cryptés. Début décembre 2020, la presse marocaine a fait écho d'un crime commis par un adolescent accro aux jeux vidéo en ligne sur sa mère, qui n'aurait pas accepté sa demande de recharge Internet pour continuer son jeu. Ce tragique événement n'est nullement, mais malheureusement pas isolé. La presse rapporte chaque jour des exemples d'extrême addiction aux jeux vidéo, à l'instar d'un adolescent philippin accro aux jeux vidéo et nourri par sa mère pendant qu'il joue. Il ne fait même plus pause pour aller aux toilettes. Ou comment certains médias sociaux basés sur les photos pourraient avoir de l'influence sur des adolescents, les poussant même au suicide. Bien que des entreprises gérant les réseaux sociaux annoncent régulièrement la suppression de comptes et pages opérant entre autres au Maroc ou ailleurs, propageant des messages faisant l'apologie du terrorisme, des experts soupçonnent que les algorithmes utilisés par les réseaux sociaux favorisent l'embrigadement terroriste. En octobre 2020, la presse a rapporté le danger de la radicalisation rapide et l'enjeu du terrorisme sur Internet. La famille d'un membre d'une cellule terroriste démantelée a témoigné de sa transformation d'un milieu artistique à une personne renfermée plongeant dans le terrorisme digital. Plusieurs experts soupçonnent également que les algorithmes utilisés par les réseaux sociaux favorisent l'expansion de la radicalisation et des théories conspirationnistes. Un think tank américain estime que depuis l'accord de Paris Sur le climat, plus de 70 millions de personnes ont eu accès sur Facebook à des contenus comprenant de la désinformation sur la climatologie. Ce même think tank a découvert sur Facebook 51 annonces différentes de contenus climato-sceptiques. Parmi ces annonces, une seule a été supprimée par la plateforme, alors qu'en tout, ces annonces ont été visionnées par 8 millions d'utilisateurs aux États-Unis seuls. Dans le même sens, selon une étude, YouTube aurait non seulement fermé les yeux, mais aidé les contenus conspirationnistes à polluer, n'hésitant pas à les mettre en avant pour générer toujours plus d'engagement. Le contenu conspirationniste a battu son plein en période de Covid-19. Notons, nous ne combattons pas seulement une épidémie, nous combattons une infodémie, avait averti en février dernier le directeur général de l'OMS. Mesdames et messieurs, le Conseil national des droits de l'homme a travaillé depuis 2 ans sur la question des impacts de la technologie digitale sur les droits humains. Il organise un séminaire international le 3 décembre prochain sur la question en concertation avec des experts, des acteurs au niveau national et international. En relation avec la thématique de ce panel, je souhaite adresser les questions des risques de la radicalisation par les médias sociaux en travaillant notamment sur les questions suivantes. Protéger le public, surtout les groupes des enfants et des jeunes, contre les risques de la radicalisation par les médias sociaux, surtout que ces derniers sont devenus partie intégrante de l'intimité et de la vie privée, des fois débordant sur la vie publique des individus. Promouvoir plus de contenu, promouvant la culture de la différence, de l'acceptation de l'autre et du vivre ensemble. Œuvrer avec les entreprises technologiques et les autres parties prenantes pour combattre les contenus liés à l'extrémisme et à la radicalisation par une organisation intelligente respectant le droit international des droits de l'homme et les principes directeurs de l'ONU instituant la diligence de ces entreprises en matière des droits humains. Munir les groupes vulnérables, surtout jeunes et enfants, d'outils par la culture, par l'école, à même de leur permettre l'autoprotection de la radicalisation par les réseaux sociaux et enfin encourager la coopération multilatérale avec le concours des institutions nationales et internationales et des universités autour des impacts de l'utilisation de l'intelligence émotionnelle et l'intelligence artificielle sur les droits humains en général et sur la prévention de la radicalisation en particulier. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Ben. Salah, thank you very much. I'm sorry if I created an inconvenience, but in the program I got from the organizers, you were the last panelist. So now, last but not least, it is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Alina Bergawanu. She's a Romanian university professor and the Dean of the Faculty of Communication and Public Relations of the National University of Political Sciences and Public Administration in Bucharest, of which she was also the acting rector between 2012 and 2014. She is also the current chair of the board of the European Institute of Romania, a public institution that supports the government of Romania in its policy making as a member of the European Union. So, Ms. Bergawanu, you have the floor. Thank you.
It is amazing that after 2 years of Zooming and WebEx and stuff like this, I still miss the mute button. So please excuse that this comes with the pandemic. Your Excellencies, thank you very much for this invitation. Thank you, Director Fota, for considering me as part of this panel. I was very glad when I found about the topic of this panel, the risk of radicalization on social media. My background is in disinformation and in cluster topics such as polarization, radicalization. And frankly speaking, this topic really goes to my heart because, for example, I started to study radicalization on social media after a seminal article written by Farid Zakaria in Washington Post after the terrorist attacks in Paris, in which the famous writer said that today's terrorists were radical before they were religious. Hence, his advice that we have to study radicalization in order to understand what is going on, and only after that to go into the religious realm. And I listened to all the previous presentation with great attention. Really, I felt inspired. I took some notes as a young pupil. Really, I felt inspired by the opening speeches, by the idea that today's radicalization taps into dissatisfaction of young people, and that definitely we are looking for alternative paths for sense making and belonging. And this definitely fits into my work, and I will ask for your permission to present some slides. So again, my background is in disinformation, but again, I think that disinformation, polarization, radicalization share a lot of conceptual work, and this is why really I enjoy being part of this panel. So very briefly, I will give you my thoughts about disinformation 2.0 and how it fits with this funny ideology of exclusion, which in its turn, I think it creates the fertile ground for radicalization, for extremism, and in some more extreme cases, even to terrorist behavior. I will argue, as the previous speaker said, that disinformation, contemporary disinformation, is a new phenomenon which has a strong technology factor. This is why we are discussing social media and radicalization, social media and extremism. So I will argue why this is a new phenomenon. I will try to explain why there are some misconceptions about disinformation, why applying old thinking about propaganda is counterproductive. Then I will talk very briefly about polarization, which is structurally nurtured by social media. This is my philosophical, my theoretical premise. And then I will give you some very brief examples of symbolic radicalization, symbolic extremism from the Romanian social media in the context of the vaccination campaign. As I have told you, I will argue that disinformation 2.0 is a new phenomenon, which is different from what happened in other historical situations. Contemporary propaganda, disinformation, amplifying, you name it, take place under conditions of information overabundance and not under conditions of information scarcity. So I think this is a completely changed environment in which apparently there is too much information or too much content, to be more precise, and not less information. As I have told you, in my understanding, contemporary disinformation is technology driven. I mean, it has deeply rooted with the explosion of the internet and with social media. I don't think that we can differentiate between the two. There is a whole discussion in the literature whether technology is a driver or technology is an amplifier. My theoretical position, as I have told you, is that technology is both a driver and an amplifier, and it provides one of the structural roots for what is happening. So what is completely different is that disinformation, contemporary disinformation, provides technological possibilities to go straight to the people, which again, so there are no intermediaries, there is no leadership, there are no gatekeepers, but disinformation, hate speech, emotions, emotional bombardment can go straight to the people. Hence, it is sometimes called peer-to-peer propaganda, bottom-up propaganda, amplifying, and these are trends that relate to radicalization mechanisms too. In my understanding, contemporary disinformation or disinformation 2.0 is a twofold phenomenon, meaning that it creates, due to its technological factor, both for information manipulation, which is old propaganda, let's say, but it is an engagement manipulation. So the technology that is associated with the internet and with how social media are structured by design, it provides for the manipulation of the social context, manipulation of the component of social media. This is why I'm arguing systematically that it is a completely new phenomenon, because it adds to the information manipulation with this kind of engagement manipulation. And our distinguished speakers made references to autoplay function, for example, to algorithmic engagement, to fake accounts, to semi-automatic accounts, which can create the impression of popularity and according to our cognitive bias, popularity is a proxy for truth. Again, as Mr. Fota explained in his background introduction, contemporary disinformation does not dwell on a binary classification true versus false. This would be very, very easy. But it amplifies, it lives on a much complex spectrum, true, false, and anything in between. When we talk about disinformation, we can talk about non-factual information that can be plausible or realistic. Non-factual information, but which is political, culture, or identity-based, and this again provides a very, very close resemblance to what is happening with radicalization and extremism. It can be factual but misleading, and it can be factual but algorithmically amplified, for example. So going back to what I said, that contemporary propaganda, contemporary disinformation is a manipulation of information, but it is also amplification, it is a manipulation of the amplification mechanisms by fake accounts, autoplay functions, semi-automated accounts, troll factories, like factories, clickbait factories, and stuff like that. Also, I am arguing that contemporary propaganda, contemporary disinformation has different tactics and objectives contemporary to traditional propaganda. And I think here I am contradicting, I am arguing against some popular accounts of propaganda. So according to my understanding, contemporary propaganda weaponizes every major controversy in a society. So this is the main recipe of disinformation, to see what are the hot button issues in a society and to amplify positions on both sides of the debate. So I think that the most widespread popular misconception about disinformation is that it amplifies positions only on one side of the debate. According to my knowledge, according to my research, according to the research that was widely done in the United States in the context of the 2016 elections, the major recipe of disinformation is again to weaponize major controversies in a society and to amplify positions on both sides of the debate. Contemporary propaganda does not necessarily seek to hijack a candidate or a political party, which again is a popular misconception, but it rather seeks to hijack public conversation altogether, so to change the terms of public conversation. And again, feeding back into the title of my presentation, it does not necessarily to convince someone of something. That was old propaganda, but it seeks to polarize, to disrupt, and to shape public conversation, such as to kill the very possibility of civil discourse. This is why it is widely connected to hate speech, to symbolic violence, and to mechanisms for radicalization. So again, in my understanding, the contemporary propaganda seeks not to convince you necessarily of something, but mainly to polarize and to disrupt public conversation. And also feeding back into the into the title of my presentation, that disinformation breeds polarization. The effect of disinformation is a specific type of polarization, which is cognitive and emotional at the same time. It creates an all or nothing mindset, us versus them, irrespective of specific topics. So I think that the biggest effect of contemporary disinformation that we can see across the world, across the Western world, across the European Union, is that kind of specific type of polarization, which is both cognitive and emotional, the creation of these camps which find themselves like they cannot share anything. All or nothing, us versus them, irrespective of specific topics. And I think that this is where disinformation really intersects with radicalization mechanisms, because when talking about the radicalization, we are talking about some camps that consider themselves irreconcilable. So cognitive warfare creates political and social fragmentation. It dwells in provoking reactions and in the viralization of reactions, no matter what the nature of these reactions are. So again, contemporary propaganda seeks to identify the hot button issues in a society, the controversial issues, the historical grievances, the religious cleavages, and to provide megaphone to both sides of the debate or to all sides of the debate. And it greatly connects to the implosion of the middle ground. So this is, according to my knowledge, to my reading, and to my research, the contemporary recipe to fracture society, to split society into some homogeneous camps, us versus them. So people who, even if they have to share a territory, they do not have anything in common. Hence, this kind of political and social fragmentation. I will provide you with some striking examples from the Romanian Facebook. It is not only Facebook, but it is across platforms. It is also across TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and also on less known platforms such as Telegram or Rumble, which are newcomers. So in the context of the vaccination, I have discovered this kind of frames, which I find really outrageous. First of all, the COVID-19 Nazi analogies, and after that, the raw exit analogies. And again, these are quite widespread. These are not from the fringe on the internet, but for example, this is some discourse that you can hear in the Romanian parliament, that instead of introducing the green pass, you'd better send us to chambers, to gas chambers, and to get us killed. So again, this is not from the fringe of the internet, but it is part of the public discourse. And as I have told you, the objective of contemporary disinformation is to hijack public conversation and to change the terms, to impose the terms of public conversation. These are, again, the examples speak for themselves. The current COVID crisis is compared to a new Holocaust, to a modern Auschwitz. Wearing masks is compared to a genocide. Hospitals are compared to concentration camps. And you see here some very powerful visuals. Again, there are some, the images speaks for themselves. Here it says unvaccinated Romania, using the yellow star of David in order to create the idea that the unvaccinated people are segregated. The second frame that I chose that fits my conceptual work is the emergence of visceral exit frame, which for Romania is a newcomer to the discussion. 2 years ago, before the pandemic, you couldn't have seen something like this, except in some very dark corners of the internet. Now it is a narrative which is in plain sight. So it shows the transition of medical narratives to political narratives and then to geopolitical narratives. And what I think is an interest for our conference, this is a geopolitical framing, but it dwells on the strategy of othering. I mean, to create this polarization, us versus them, pro, anti, and to amplify the debate. Here again, the visuals are very, very powerful, with the European flag set on fire or broken. The idea is that Romania is a slave country. It is an us versus them ideology. We want the foreigners out of the country. We can no longer share the territory with them, so let's chase them away. Again, the visuals are self-explanatory. And here, what I put here, which is the most striking example, is lately the Nazi analogy starts to interfere more with the anti-EU, anti-Western, and with the raw exit frame. So apparently, this kind of othering strategic narratives start to collapse. And the anger of the population, the revolt of the population, which within some limits is to be understood, is weaponized in order to create this kind of pan-ideology of exclusion. So us versus them, we have nothing to share. Let the foreigners leave the country and leave us alone. We are an idyllic country that is enslaved by some global powers. So in order to conclude my presentation, tackling disinformation is a whole of society endeavor, just as it was clearly expressed by the previous speakers. So tackling disinformation is a whole of society endeavor. And I found this quote, which I find particularly illuminating for me, that we have to move away from treating this as stopping some Russian bots or giving people better facts. But in order to tackle disinformation, we have to treat information infrastructures as critical infrastructures, the way we treat the integrity of our financial markets. In order to come up with, to solve this issue, this topic, the discussion is very, very long. I can talk for hours about how to fight disinformation, how to anticipate, how to prevent, and probably how to tackle it. I put here some things which I think are relevant for the profile of the conference. I think that solutions, short-term solution is to invest a lot in literacy, but I mean literacy for high-level decision makers. In Romania, at least, we started the discussion with literacy for the masses, for the regular people, which is a very important thing. But I think that first we have to start with literacy for high-level decision makers. And I mean a very specific type of literacy: digital literacy, technological literacy, algorithmic literacy, data literacy, to understand how cognitive warfare takes place. What is algorithmic engagement, how data is collected, what data brokers are, and how data can fall into the hands of wrong people. And also this, again, is very consistent with everything that has been said before my speech, that the mid and long-term solutions to these problems, whether we talk about disinformation, radicalization, or extremism, is to address internal vulnerabilities. In the context of disinformation, has always a kernel of truth. Whether this is small or large, it is a completely different thing. But I think that in order to come up with mid and long-term solutions, both to disinformation, to polarization, to emotional polarization and radicalization, is to address internal vulnerabilities and dysfunctionalities, such as tackling inequality and sources of anger, sources of resentment, investing in good media and information system, including public broadcasters, inclusive leadership, which is exactly the topic of the conference, and come up with good governance and with public goods. Thank you very much for the time that you allotted to me, and I'm looking forward to possible questions.
Thank you very much, Professor Burgawano. Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. So, after 4 very interesting presentations for distinguished panelists, before reaching the end of this session and the end of the first day of this interesting conference, it is my duty to tell you that we have also time for questions, for some complementary remarks, for criticism. So if there is anybody you know interested to take the floor, either you may use the raise hand button and I will see you, or you may use the chat facility. Although, to be honest, I would prefer for you to use the raise button because it's easier for me to see you. But anyway, you have both choices at your disposal. So is anybody interested to, either from the panelists or among the participants, to use this opportunity to complement the discussion, to raise new questions, to raise new aspects? No, nobody. Okay. In this case, let me conclude this session. Let me again express my gratitude to our 4 panelists for their contribution to this debate. Let me wish you all the best. And again, let me express also my gratitude also for the organizers for putting in place on such a short notice and not quite in easy conditions, you know, a very interesting and important conference. I wish you all the best, and please pay the highest attention possible to your health. Thank you.